Welcome back, guys. My name is Adam. I have Rusmin.
Hello.
And Victor.
Hi everyone.
And today we're going to have a very special guest. His name is Matthew.
Hello.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us here today. And the reason why we have Matthew here today is because he's going to share his story about how you achieved FIRE at the age of 37, which is extremely young. So FIRE is like financially independent, retire early. I know you're still working. You still plan to work some more. But I think the interesting thing about your story, and I want everyone to learn about it, is that you achieved FIRE at this age. And the thing is, you have 2 young kids. You have a son who is 5
Yep.
and a daughter who's 2.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I think for a lot of people here who might be watching this, they want to achieve FIRE, but sometimes they think it's a bit hard to do, especially when you have children, young children especially. How did you do it? I think that's the interesting thing that we want to learn here today, and we want to share your story, and possibly someone will learn something from this. So before we jump into all of that, tell us a bit more about yourself and your background and who you are.
Sure. My name is Matthew. I just turned 37 and I currently work at a local polytechnic. So I work in the IT department and I've been doing so for about 12 or 13 years.
Yeah.
We really started this journey around the same time, 12 or 13 years ago. And really fortunate that a lot of stars have aligned along the way, and so really excited to share the story, and hopefully hope your viewers and listeners can learn a bit from that, and possibly also take it on in their own lives as well.
All right. I think some people would think, use FIRE because inheritance or something like that, but you basically have you work in a polytechnic, you're in the IT line. It's a regular kind of thing that a lot of people can envision out there. So how did you achieve FIRE at 37? With 2 young kids? What was the journey like at the start, and how did you get there?
Yeah, so it really started about 12, 13 years ago. At that time, my wife and I are still dating, and she brought up this idea of applying for a BTO.
Yeah, okay.
We all gone through that.
I had no idea what a BTO is at that time.
Okay.
But after I found out what a BTO was and why she wanted to apply, we started talking about marriage and kids, So with that conversation...
That was her proposal.
Oh, okay. Cut it out. So with that, she also raised the idea of eventually becoming a single income family, which means that she wants to kind of retire from corporate work, to stay home and take care of the kids, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason for that is really twofold, right? From a secular perspective, really to spend more time with the kids, impart good values and all those good things, right? And also from a religious perspective, as Christians, we believe that we want to spend more time discipling our children, teaching them about the gospel and so forth. So that was the genesis, and the real question was up to me to figure out whether it was feasible and how we would do it.
So all this was before you got married?
This was before we got married.
This whole discussion?
Correct.
Wow,
Correct.
okay. That's a good
thing. But we were
thing.
thinking about getting married,
so
we were thinking about it seriously, right? And then that comes with the BTO conversation.
All right, so in the end, you got married and then the BTO came. And how was that whole thing like,
Correct. So I think the good thing about this journey is that we really started early, right? So earlier you talked about the idea of having 2 kids, and how someone can accumulate wealth with 2, 3, 4 kids. The trick is really to start the hard work before you have kids, and we had the good fortune of doing that, right? Which means that back in 2012 when we started working, we started saving aggressively, and the kids really only came in 2019, 2020. So we had a good 7-8 years of runway to really save as a dual income couple. Without kids, so able to control your expenses. I will also say that a portion of that time we were not married yet, so we were still staying with our parents. So typically when you're staying with your parents, you get a lot of inherent subsidies, right? They cook dinner for you, they pay for your bills.
They pay for the rental.
You have to pay for rental. So I think all these contributed to that journey. So I would say that certainly I recognize the difficulties of accumulating wealth, because children come with a bunch of expenses, but I think we were fortunate to be able to have a bit of runway before the kids came.
So I guess your initial saving, you and your wife, were actually quite a big chunk, part of it.
Definitely. So I think we were never big income earners. I think I started off making maybe 50-something, 60,000 a year. My wife started off maybe in the 30s, right? 30-something. So I think together it's not a huge income, but I think because of our goal, we're trying to reach this single income status, right, where my wife can leave her job and stay at home. So then I think we were trying to save, 50, 60, 70% of our income at one point. And of course, and even as the incomes grew over time, I think what we tried to do was really to take that increase in income and really put it into savings
rather than spending more.
Spending it more.
So you try to keep your expenses as consistent as possible throughout the years.
Yes.
Oh wow! So the percentage will have grown.
Correct.
Right,
I think the percentage would have grown over time.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would have peaked at, but we tried to at least have a chance at this single income thing.
Makes sense.
I think it's very interesting because a lot of people all the time say the best saving is before the kids come, before you're married, before everything. That's the best saving, right? But a lot of the couples, they don't tend to talk before the marriage, right? Because before it's like you're separate. Right? I mean, you're boyfriend, girlfriend, but
you're right. Not everyone has a conversation about how you want to save.
The normal people, I mean, it's very interesting. Just a question of BTO, then kickstart, and I want to take care of the kids, and just kickstart this journey for 8 years for him to have an advance. 8 years to massive save this amount. I mean, while doing that, do you sacrifice any like holidays or do you feel that you live too thrifty until you like basically like no life or something like that?
Sure. Great question. I think all through the past 12, 13 years, we've always tried to seek a balance. Okay, so very cliche word, seek a balance, right? But importantly, I think while trying to achieve this savings goal, I never felt as though we really had to make huge sacrifices on the things that we enjoy, right? Sure, we cut back in some places, right? So I'll give one example, maybe to emphasize on the cutting back. So typically we prioritize the things we want to spend on, and then we find certain areas to cut back on, okay, that we may not derive a huge amount of value from. So I'll give an example. These days we like to go on vacations, right? Never believe in cutting back on vacations, right? So for example, you don't go and stay in a dingy little hotel just to save money. I never believe in that. But back in 2017, 2018, a lot of our friends were getting married. So we're part of a church community. Then on top of that, you have your work friends, your colleagues, your secondary school friends. So at that point in time, we were getting a wedding invitation every 2 weeks. So you
I remember those days.
I remember.
So I mean, just a bit of math, so it might be 30 weddings a year. Okay.
Wow, that's a big group that you have.
So it might be I don't know what's 30 times.
$200.
It's more like 500 because you're going as two, right?
Okay, yes.
So it's like 15,000
a
year.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's one area that we specifically cut back on. We said, okay, that's way too many weddings, right? So we'll have to prioritize the very important ones and attend, right? And then maybe the not so important ones we have to decline. Right? So I think your question was, what have you sacrificed, what have you cut back on, right? So I feel like we've cut back on some areas, but it's typically these areas that we actually don't feel much pain cutting back on. You know what I'm saying? So I think that really is the trick.
So when you go travel, do you travel the surrounding or you go further?
It depends on wherever my wife wants to go, because obviously she's the travel expert. But year on year, I also ask her the same question. I say, do you feel that we have been too thrifty? Do you feel that there are areas where we can kind of loosen up on, right? And year after year, she tells me that no, it feels fine, right? And then I think it's okay, So that's kind of the gauge that I use to measure whether we are doing okay or not.
That's fantastic. I think the balance is a good thing. I think a few things that we can bring up from your sharing so far is that you had a regular income, regular job. It wasn't inheritance, but because you had this conversation with a partner that you have a great relationship with, because hey, we're in this together. This is our plan to get to where we want to go. And I mean, I give you credit. Some women could share that story with you. I don't want to work anymore, and some guys will go like, "Oh man, I'm not sure about that."
I had that reaction. So I had that reaction.
Okay, so I mean, but then you came up with a plan. Okay, if you really want to do that, how can we get there? And you took the responsibility to just kind of, okay, fine, let's figure out how we can get there. Your incomes grew, saved more money, and you still struck a balance. You still go on holidays and everything. So you had a good 7-8 years before you had kids, right? And I think you said that was probably the best time to save a lot of money, get the foundation right, and then things kind of changed a little bit or a lot when the kids came. So I have a table of what you shared with us as well, how your journey from 23 to 37, which is how old you are this year, and you kind of like listed down your income every single year as a household, how much you spent, and and how much you put away into your CPF, your equities and stuff like that. So someone could say, oh, you really did this by just really being really consistent with your actions and your decisions, right? So I mean, just congratulations for this whole thing.
So that's the household.
Household.
Yeah,
it's household.
excluding the house, right?
And you mentioned that you fully paid off your home as well.
Yeah, so I think we are also fortunate to be able to get a BTO flat. Okay?
Yes.
So I want to emphasize that in today's property market, you might see that prices are very high. Right? But back in 2011, property prices were not really that high. And then on top of that, you get some subsidy, right? Based on the BTO. So I think we only paid about 500 for our BTO, right? Which is quite low, I think, in today's
compared to today's
market, right? So I think that's my point right in the beginning, right? Where many factors have to kind of line up and work together for this to happen. So it's not really a one-person effort.
Yeah, I mean, luck does come into it, timing comes into it. And for our international viewers, I mean, BTO is basically public housing in Singapore where you can buy a flat. It's very nice flats in Singapore. And someone who's watching this, one question they can ask, right? Why did you choose to pay off your BTO? I mean, your home so fast. Why not just stretch it out?
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
So of course, the logical, financially correct thing to do would be to say, okay, I can kind of have a $300,000-$400,000 mortgage, right? This the interest you're paying is only 2.5%, something like that, right? And then of course you would have you would be able to, for example, put the rest of the money into your special CPF special account. You get 4+%. Right? Of course, it makes sense, right? I think we also did put some cash into the house. So you might say that, oh, if you take this cash and you invest it at a higher rate, it's good for you, right? But I do think that paying off the house a bit earlier does give you some sense of reassurance and peace, So the real question is whether the financial benefit is so large that you can kind of put this piece aside, So I think for us, we didn't really want to be burdened with having to pay the mortgage every month. It's one less thing to think about, and it also gave us, just a sense of peace and freedom.
Yeah, I think that's some people say that would be priceless, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's priceless.
I mean, it cost about $500,000, but it just allows you to just sleep like, this is taken care of. It's done.
So I think that's the general perspective.
Okay, would you ever upgrade? And go through the whole thing again. It's like, okay, let's move on to a condo, $1-2 million, and then the whole cycle starts. Would you ever consider that?
Right now, I think it's not feasible for us because it would require quite a large sum of money to be put into the house. And I think right now our priority really is to say, okay, my wife can kind of stay at home, peace of mind, look after the kids, fully focus on that, right? But if we take that step, right, which is the typical Singapore upgrade property ladder kind of thing, I just think it will put a lot of stress on the family, and I don't really appreciate the stress. So I doubt it. I doubt it. Maybe further out in the future, we might think about it. Depends on how the finances kind of change, right? But right now, I think it would just be such a burden on the family.
Your quality of life would suffer.
I think so. I think so. I just don't think it would be worth it.
I think what Matthew says it makes sense because a lot of times I always heard my friends say, you upgrade your condo, it's a forced saving.
In a way.
Force you to save.
Force you to save.
This assume that your job is still there, everything is still there, everything is constant, right? But if anything happened to you or you lose your job, then that's going to be a big stress. Which he was saying, like, why make yourself into a very stressful situation?
Yeah, that's true.
So on this end, do you also have your buy any insurance to make sure that it's taken care of?
Yes.
Maybe just curious to find out.
So insurance super important. Right. So I think typically we always talk about saving and spending.
Yes.
And then we talk about investing.
Correct.
Right, in terms of building wealth. And then we kind of forget about the insurance part.
Protection.
So in fact, a large part of my family expenses goes to insurance. Right? We spend $50,000 a year.
Wow.
Exclude mortgage, exclude mortgage, and roughly 8,000-ish, which is almost 20%, goes to insurance.
Okay.
So I think it's on the high side, But that being said, I think it's important. So we have quite a large amount of term insurance.
Okay.
And that's because we want to kind of keep this single income family thing intact, right? So
yeah.
the thinking is, okay, if one day something happens to me, right, my wife should have a large enough insurance payout such that she doesn't have to return to work. That's the logic.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And if something were to happen to her, right, then I should be able to have a large enough payout to quit my job and become the stay-at-home parent.
Okay.
So that protection is both ways,
Yep.
right? And whatever it is, it makes sure that, okay, the kids will continue to have a parent stay at home and looking after
Would
them
that
and so
equation
forth.
change the moment your kids start working? Like you say, okay, I will dial it back in a way.
I think the answer is probably yes.
Okay.
So in fact, I only purchased these term policies up to something like when my kids will be 25, 27. So it's not for life,
Yeah.
you know? Because the thinking is that, you know, by the time they are 25, 27, they should have their own job, hopefully. Maybe they'll be married. I also have their own BTO. Have their own BTO.
Follow your footsteps.
Very hard for that.
I think this is very important because a lot of the young parents, they may not have considered this insurance of this death, you know, in case of either partner. I also do have this also until, say, about my kids, about 21 or 22.
Then you just
Then I just stop.
Yeah.
Okay, but I know that if anything happen, my wife is taken care. If anything happen to my wife, I'm taken care. Right? So you give the flexibility. I think that's a thing that every parent should consider. I mean, young parents should consider. But of course, when your kids grow up, just let them go.
It's your life, man.
Yeah, it's your
Do
life.
what you want.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think on top of that, we typically have the hospitalization insurances.
Yes,
right?
yeah, the
so
basic.
I think it's always really a balance of trying to control costs now because you don't want to be paying tons of money for these premiums, but you also need to be sufficiently protected, lah. I think that's really important.
Okay.
So how have your life changed after your expenses changed after the kids start coming up? Yeah.
Sure. So of course, naturally the answer is it's gone up.
Yeah.
Right. We've tried very hard to control and taper the increase. Right.
Yeah.
Give some examples. I mean, we can choose to send my son to a preschool that costs 25,000 a year.
Wow.
I could,
Yeah,
we could,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
But we only pay 8,000 plus a year for his preschool. Right.
Okay.
So that's one example. We also subscribe to the idea of we don't want to spend crazy amounts of money on new toys. So we try to buy second hand, right? We try to use hand-me-downs and so forth. So despite controlling this, the expenses of course have gone up a little bit. You know, last time you don't have to pay for kindergarten, now you have to pay. Right? So general day-to-day things also there's some expense involved. But I do think that as I reflect on this a lot, right, because of the two young kids, typically the large costs are typically associated with one, preschool, and two, enrichment things.
Enrichment.
Right? So means if you want to send them for taekwondo, violin, piano, ballet,
all
horse
this will
riding,
add up,
fencing, you know, these are the expensive things.
So do your kids go for enrichment?
The answer is they are still young, so no need.
Okay.
Right? So we hold off first, but we'll observe and see how things develop.
Where the natural talents lie, what
Correct,
the natural interests
exactly.
are.
Yeah, exactly. We don't typically subscribe to the notion of we need to send them to everything so that they'll be the smartest in everything.
Yeah.
You know?
But do you send them to like because nowadays the young kids, they goes to phonics, they go for early Chinese classes. Do you send them there or?
I mean, okay, so my wife and I, our philosophy is from 0 to 6, we're going to let the kids enjoy as much as they can. Because the logic is, once they start primary school at 7, they're going to have a lot of school ahead of them. Right? So we don't feel that there's a real need to really start that learning process up front and front load them. So that's our philosophy. It's not really a financial decision. It's more a kind of life decision where we worry the kids will be very stressed. We worry that they'll not have as much fun as they're having now. So I think that's the genesis of
I think the enrichment class, like this phonics and Chinese class, is one of the bigger expense for the preschool kids. I mean, I'm also paying for my son. No, I mean, you one kid already with this amount about that, 2 kids some more. Right?
I for my own kids, I also have 2. Okay, so I send my other one to the phonics class, and then my young one is still have not going to the preschool, about 2, which I mean, lack of teacher because of that, right? So, but do you feel like constantly I think especially in Singapore, I feel that when you go and hang out with your friends, right, especially those with kids, there's a lot of pressure, right? I send my son to this and that, and how much it costs. It seems to be like talking about it. I mean, they're not bragging, but you can feel that these are all the big ticket items. Like what you say, right? The one preschool can cost you like 25,000 a year. Do you constantly feel the same pressure?
Great question.
Yeah.
So I feel it all the time. I feel it all the time. But let me explain the perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
I actually can understand where these parents are coming from, right? Meaning they just want to give their children the best in life.
Yeah.
I understand. You know, me too, right? But then you say, okay, wouldn't it be better to just send them to these classes, right? Because you never know, right? You never know. Maybe they'll be a genius in this and that, or you really don't want them to kind of lag behind their peers, right?
Yeah.
But again, I do bring up the Christian perspective from this, right? We actually want to model to our children that a lot of these social things, like good grades, being able to speak good Mandarin, it's not really something we want to focus on, right? We want to focus on, living a Christ-centered life and so forth. Yeah. So I think that's where we're coming from, and we kind of are going along with that philosophy, and certainly we try our best to resist the societal pressure that we feel, which is very great. Very good. So I really must admit.
Yeah. Right? So do you have a family car or?
Yeah, so we own a car.
Yeah.
I do think that it is a huge expense, but I do think that it has incredible value. Right? I've said on some other podcasts that the car costs roughly 16,000 a year, including depreciation. Okay, but I think its value is at least 5 times that. Just the convenience, the ability to control our time. We pick the kids up every day from school at 2:00. So I think if I had to pay 60,000, I'd probably do it.
Okay, so
easily,
that's why it's worth to you.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So I think it really boils down to the earlier idea of how we are willing to pay for the things that we value, right? And then those things that we don't really value, we'll try to cut back on.
The car you bought many years ago,
we bought a used car about 6-7 years ago.
Yeah,
so it's like 9 years old now.
So when about time when you were planning for the kids,
that's correct. Yeah, actually when we just got married.
So when the COE runs up, will you get another one?
So it's actually running out in a year and a half.
Yeah.
Right. I have no choice. I'll buy a 5 years extension.
Okay.
So that's the current plan.
Okay. I mean, you don't need a fancy car. It just gets you from point A to B. It's safe and comfortable.
Yeah,
I mean, the time saved with your family is priceless, right?
Yeah. That's
Do you have a domestic helper?
We don't.
Okay. So who does the housework?
It's a shared responsibility.
That's something that I value the most, actually.
But I would say that it's not a 50-50 split. It's not 50-50.
So you do more of it?
No comments on that.
Your wife is watching.
No comments on that.
Okay, so from the table that you sent us, right? So your cash and equity is about 1.4 plus. Okay, then your SA and MA add up is about 500,000.
459.
459. Okay, 459. So that's add up about close to 2 million.
2 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say talk about your cash and equity. So this one is purely from savings, or do you buy bonds, or you do investment along the way, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you can share.
How did you grow that amount? Yeah.
So it's mostly from savings. Like I say, we started 12-13 years ago, and we just kind of plowed at it, year after year. We also had the COVID incident, which was in 2020, and I just want to say that COVID is actually a huge societal disaster, right? A lot of people lost their lives. A lot of children across the world were kind of plucked out from education, and it's actually a very sad kind of occurrence. But I will also say that the crisis presents an investing opportunity, right? As with any crisis, and we did make some investments at that time. And when the markets recover, of course, we made some money off that. So the bulk of the work really is savings in the first 7-8 years of dual income family, and a little bit of extras from the investing front. But again, we're not Bitcoin investors or fancy things. We are very kind of run of the mill kind of investing people. It helps that a lot of the asset base was built up from savings, because you don't really need to be ultra aggressive on the investing front if you start off with a larger base. So I think that's one of the important things.
I think to me the most important thing is that you achieve this without compromising too much things, and both you and your wives are happy with it.
So during the COVID, what do you bought?
Okay. So during COVID, we bought purely into the STI ETF, right? At that time, I didn't know much about investing, and the STI ETF comprised of a bunch of comfortable names, the banks, ST Engineering, so things that were blue chip and familiar, most importantly, as a Singaporean, right? So now in retrospect, obviously, I don't think it's a very good investment, right? From the business perspective, right? Meaning that these businesses are okay, but they are not really as good as those available globally, right? So although we made some money from there, I do think occasionally about the opportunity cost, a lot more money could have been made if I had been wiser about investments. But I also see it as an education journey, meaning with a certain amount of knowledge and experience and a certain amount of comfort, then you might buy certain things, right? I use STI ETF as an example. Gave me a lot of comfort, right? And I wouldn't have been comfortable buying, individual US equities and so forth. At that point in time, exactly. I do think that it's a developmental journey, and I do think that everyone kind of needs to go on that journey on their own as well.
So I think this earlier saving does help him a lot. I mean, he bought the STI ETF during the 2020.
Great timing.
He bought the 2020. I think you liquidated in 2022 or something. So that books a 200,000 gain in profit because the amount of money that you put into the ETF, right? So imagine he don't have this amount, he won't have that 200,000, right? So I think at the end of the day, investing is really a number game, right? So you have the big number. You have 1 million, 10% is 100,000. Right? You don't need to make so much to get the 100,000, right? So I think that 200,000 gain also help you a lot to push. Once you sell, you go and continue invest into other equities or.
So I think important point riding on that is that my wife and I realized early on we're not very clever investors, right? But we are pretty okay at the savings game. So I think we spend quite a lot of years really focusing on that, seeing it as our strength, right? This investing thing really only came in the later years, which is the last 3 or 4 years or so, right? So it took me 2 years to realize my STI ETF mistake.
Still made you money.
Still made money. I do think about the portion that I could have made a lot. I don't lose sleep over it. But I do think about it. I also bring up one more point here. I have a close friend who spent 5 or 6 years telling me that the STI ETF comprises businesses that are not really that fantastic. But I was very stubborn, so I never listened to him. But he never gave up on me. So 5 or 6 years he continued. Every Chinese New Year, every Christmas, every time we played mahjong together, he would tell me, these STI ETF businesses are very lousy. Please buy the world ETF. It's globally diversified. It's exposed to developing countries. It has better growth and so forth. So finally, in 2022, I think it finally clicked. And that was when I gave up on this STI ETF thing. So currently I own some individual companies, right? But also really to emphasize that I don't think that that's the correct or the best way for everybody. Generally, I would recommend, as what Warren Buffett says, buy a broad-based, diversified ETFs, right? The world ETF is a very good example. And the important thing is to really keep buying when times are good and keep buying when times are bad, especially when times are bad. So I think that's the important thing, and I would certainly recommend.
I wouldn't say the STI ETF is a bad ETF. It really depends on your goals. And maybe for you, you're looking for more growth, more bang for your buck, and I guess the STI ETF didn't match that completely. Still gave you a good profit, but then you finally found something that you really resonated with in terms of how you invest, and then you went in that direction. For someone else, could be something else. A lot of people who watch this also like Singapore stocks because of their dividends. And at a later age and all that.
So what do you switch into after you get out of the STI ETF?
So I hold a bunch of individual names now.
How many holdings you have?
I have 10 holdings.
that kind of suits your risk profile. You're comfortable with it, right?
I'm extremely comfortable with it.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, riding on Adam's point, I think if you take a profile of a retiree with a large asset base, actually the STIDF makes sense, right? Because they pay you a 4.5% dividend every year, and then you can kind of live off it. If you're not a large spender, then I think
would you ever see yourself doing that when you're 65? Back to Singapore.
I mean, to me, I would take the world ETF over the STI ETF.
Okay.
I just think it has the same qualities, right? But it has probably a better base of businesses.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think the world ETF is a good one for the family.
Yeah,
right?
the VWRA or something like that.
VWRA, yeah. So because I think just now we were discussing, what if something happened to you, or what your wife should do, right? I mean, for me, I always tell my wife, if anything happened to me, liquidate everything, just go and buy VWRA, right? If you don't know how to buy, just ask Adam or Rusmin.
And until a certain point, then you switch it over to something else?
No, I just
ask VWRA and all the way?
Just all the way.
Okay.
So I just tell her, do you use that? Then every year you just liquidate 4%.
Okay.
For
Just keep it
the
simple.
family expense and all this. Plus,
okay.
if you're not working, I mean, like you say, in the event that she need to take care of the kids for 2 years.
Okay,
so
got
I
it.
mean, this also part of family planning. I feel is very important because a lot of people, they don't take into account, right? Because everyone will say, I can live a long life. We live in Singapore. It's a blue zone. Right? But you never know. You never know.
You have all these contingencies in place. So that's equity side. I guess bonds, you just rely on your CPF, you maxed it out and stuff like that, or you contribute 8,000 a year and stuff like that.
Okay, I don't own any bonds. I also don't contribute the $8,000 a year to my CPF.
Okay.
Just because since we have moved to a single income, now we don't have that much income.
Okay.
So I don't think it's prudent to put extra money into the CPF.
When do you move to a single income?
We moved to 1.5 incomes in 2019. So that was the birth of my older one.
Okay.
And then we moved to single income in 22, birth of my second one.
Okay.
So about 2 years.
So it's been about 2 years.
About 2 years.
Yes, it's been about 2 years.
Okay so far? Good?
Okay so far.
You must say it's good. It's
okay
good.
so far. Well, I would say this. I would say that certainly my wife likes it.
Yeah.
So I think she enjoys this arrangement. She really gets a lot of time with the kids, although it's very tiring, very annoying, a lot of tantrums. Okay. But I think if we look at it holistically, I think she's satisfied with this arrangement.
That's fantastic. Okay. Any mistakes you made along the way? I mean, I think you've said you've been very lucky and blessed that you managed to get to where you are today. You made a lot of consistent decisions as well. But any mistakes that you made along the way that you feel that you can just improve things a little bit?
I think no big mistakes.
Okay.
No big mistakes. Like I mentioned, maybe on the investing front, could have done a bit better. But given the knowledge that I had at that time, given the comfort level, I'm not sure I would have done anything different. I'm not sure I could have improved on it. But I do reflect on it from time to time and say that, of course, if I had done this, then the results or the outcome would have been so much better, right? But unfortunately, life and investing, it's not something you get to play backwards, right? You kind of get to only play it forward, So although I think about it sometimes, but I think I don't beat myself up, and I don't lose sleep over it,
All right. So it's pretty good so far. Yeah.
It's been okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, thankfully we haven't made any huge mistakes that end up losing a lot of money. We are also very thankful that we haven't had huge maybe health or medical issues that would cost a large sum. I think
that's true.
And of course, who's to know what the future holds? But today I think we've been very thankful for a lot of the stars aligning, as I mentioned.
Any plan for number 3?
Okay, the answer is no. The answer is no. I think that conversation has been decided.
You know why? Because I get it all the time. So I'm sure you get it all the time, right? And once you have number 1, people ask you number 2. Once you have number 2, then number 3. Then after number 3, people ask for number 4.
Really? Do they really ask questions like that?
We do that to our friends, we know.
And it's not only Chinese New Year, it's every available opportunity.
Really? Wow, okay.
But I would say one thing on this is interesting. There is a general sentiment in Singapore now that young people do not want to have kids.
Yeah.
Or don't even want to get married because
Yeah.
they say that it's a huge financial strain.
Burden. Yeah.
Okay. But I've always maintained the position that actually it's not a huge financial strain if you again, prioritize those things that you want and then just kind of give up on those things that you think is not meaningful. Right? But the truth is that I think it's a huge strain on your kind of mental and physical energy. So I think if anyone is thinking about having children or having more kids, I would think that's the perspective to take. Whether I can keep up with them or not. Instead of always being overly focused on the finances. I feel it's very strange to say, I have one child. I don't want to have a second one because it will cost me money. I think it's very strange. If you feel that it will bring you joy as a parent and as a family, then I think it's okay.
Okay.
I mean, as a parent of two, so if I go back in time, would I want to have kids again? I'll tell myself yes. I will do it again because the joy that it brings to the family is like amazing. But the journey to at the initial stage, like what you say, is messy. Tantrum, all that stuff. Okay, I mean all these are negative side, but at the end of the day, I'm always looking forward to go back home and look at them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Every morning when I wake up, wow, there's two kids like coming to you, full of energy.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, for those people who are thinking that kids is always a financial burden, actually, in a certain extent, it will push out your expenses, but it depends on at the end of the day, whether you want to ramp up your expenses, like sending them to the expensive preschool, is your decision, right? Yeah. You can always cut down on that. I don't think it is necessary also, because of the peer pressure. Yeah. So I think that having kids, no matter where your income is really a possibility. Yeah. It's not really a financial burden at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Who knows? Next time when they grow up, they might start to give you money. Although don't expect for that.
It's definitely a huge
Yeah.
blessing and definitely a huge joy.
Okay. So I mean, so you have two young kids, and you've already, I guess, you've planned it out really well so far in your financial, future. What if one day your kids grow up and say, "Hey, man, Dad, I'm gonna go to Harvard. You pay that for me." And if one kid goes and I was like, "I want to go to Harvard too," so there's like, at that point, maybe 1 million per kid or something like that. How does that come into your finances? All that?
Yeah. It's a question I've thought about. The general answer, and I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. But the general thought is that my wife and I, our retirement comes first.
Okay.
So that's the position that we take, right? If the cost of this education or this degree or whatever is not detrimental to our retirement, we'll certainly consider.
Okay.
Right.
Fair enough.
But if it is, right, then it's no go. Right. You have to figure out some other routes. Right. So maybe just to give some perspective, you can use some numbers. So for example, if you have $3 million, right, and your children tell you that they need $500,000 each to go and study this thing, okay, they may be the most passionate kind of medical student, whatever, right? But if you have to take such a large portion of money to support this, I would just be cautious of that, right? Because I think it's important that we kind of take care of ourselves first in our old age, because you cannot rewind time, you cannot build up this nest egg again. You have no time to do that, right? So if I give another scenario where you have $10 million and say, okay, $500,000 each, then actually 10 million to 9 million, I think it's okay lah. Right? Not
Just
a big
one
difference.
less Ferrari, it's okay.
At least not heavily impacted
that's true,
in terms of the retirement and your living expenses. Then I think it's worth considering.
Okay.
So that's the position that we.
All right. Or they could just
are
get
at
scholarships. Or
Actually, if they can go Harvard, most of the time they can get scholarship, right?
I hope they do. If you have kids, and maybe if you can do that, then there are avenues for that as well. The scholarships, study loans and stuff. Would you do that?
So I mean, scholarships certainly I think are a reasonable kind of choice or a road to take. Of course, it might come with a bond of sorts, right? But I mean, if you think about it positively, a bond is also a guaranteed job, which is quite nice, right? I mean, you don't have to come back and struggle and compete and try to find a role somewhere. Study loans, I would again be cautious. I'm not sure whether, because in my mind, study loans are quite large sums, right? And then you have to pay back the interest as well. So I would be a bit cautious on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, if it were my own children suggesting that they wanted to take a study loan to go and study at some prestigious university, I would certainly caution.
They can loan it from you too.
Yeah, I mean,
but his retirement comes first.
Yeah.
So it's like you can take a loan. You're going to work for the next 40 years to go take the loan. I mean, there's one avenue if you need the money to go for whatever. But I think it's really up to the kid at that point in time. You know,
I would probably caution,
Okay.
and I would probably advise against, right, a study loan, right. I would say, okay, is there an alternative university or something like that?
Okay, so that's
you know?
your view on it.
That's my general
Okay.
perspective.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
In fact, few years ago, NTUC Income ran this campaign. It's me first, right? Encouraging Singaporeans to take care of their retirement first, as opposed to spending on all these frivolous things, including your children. Right? And I completely agree with that. I thought that, you know, weighing the odds, it's probably better to take care of your old age first. Right? Because if you imagine, if you kind of visualize forward and you say, you know, now you are 65, 70 and you're old, right? And you don't really have much financial assets. I think it's not such a pleasant, dignified kind of life to live, you know. So would you want to protect against being in that situation? I think that's a priority.
And you could end up being a burden to your children as well.
Exactly.
Which you just like
Exactly.
just
Because you can't even help yourself, how can you help people?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So I think there's a lot of risk involved in not taking care of your own retirement.
Finances,
So that's actually why, you know, I think platforms like these are important, where we can kind of encourage viewers and listeners to
Start planning early.
To start planning early
Yeah.
and really to take care of your future. You know.
Yeah, I think it's been a pleasure having you here. I mean, the journey, the story that you shared, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that may have done the same thing, but not many like you would like come up, share your story, and be so, you know, transparent about it and share it. Like, this is how I did it. You know, hopefully you can do it for yourself, especially if you're still, you know, below 40. So someone who's watching this, what's the best piece of advice you could give someone who's still like relatively young, wants to do something like you did?
I see. Okay. Probably one or two important things. First would be the savings bit. Right? So if you're young and you're working, definitely prioritize savings. Right. Now, many years ago, as a teenager, my father told me this. He said, "You know, boy, when the first day you start working, you must start saving already." I said, okay. You know, he's like the disciplinarian of the family, you know, so he just nod, okay. And he would say this to me. He would kind of like tap his pocket, you know, on his pen and say, you know, every dollar you save, it's your money. So it sounds kind of silly, right? Because obviously every dollar you save is your money, right? But now as I mature into adulthood, and especially being on this FIRE journey for many years, I realized that actually he's right. You know, every dollar that you save, really, it's your asset, you know? And so that's one thing. You want to really prioritize savings when you're young. Don't spend everything, you know, because after you get married, after you have kids and all that, it becomes a bit more difficult to save and accumulate wealth. Okay. The second point is that I think we briefly talked about it earlier. It's also related to savings, right? If you save and you have some base of accumulated assets, there may come a time where there are investment opportunities that are just too good to pass up, you know? And only with this base of assets can you make great advantage. Take great advantage of these investment opportunities. Because if your bank account is always kind of empty, then even if this great opportunity presents itself, you don't have a chance to take it up. You can't buy the thing. You see? So I would say that would be my top advice, you know, prioritize savings and start early if you can. Save as long as you can for as hard as you can. And hopefully that really buys you time and opportunities in the future.
You forgot to mention one thing: having the right spouse.
That's a big one.
Because when you start the B2O journey, your wife moves with you to do the saving. Imagine you are the one that saved and your wife are leaking. It's very hard.
Or the other way
wife
around, right?
He got the right spouse, you know, that saved with him, you know.
Actually, in this story, the most incredible miracle is my wife, because when she was younger, she was a really spendthrift person. She would spend thoughtlessly. You know, she once bought a $8,000 spa package like that.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
And I was very upset when I heard about it,
Okay.
you know. But that was purchased several years ago, right? But when she raised this goal of being a single income family, and we started to work towards it, I can see a meaningful change in her attitude towards spending. She became a lot more thoughtful, right? She became less frivolous, focused on the things that the family needs and she thinks has value. So you are exactly right in that having a spouse that has financial values that are aligned to yours is a huge help.
Yeah.
It's a huge help.
I think it's very important.
Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. The person you marry is one of the most important decisions you can make in your life.
I think the thing about people every time say, okay, when you marry it's love. But you go and see statistics, right? A lot of times people that divorce, right, is because of financial issues, you know.
Yeah.
So you get that settled, is happy wife, happy life, or happy husband, happy life.
So values are very important.
Yeah.
And part of the values will be financial values as well. I mean, this is someone you're going to walk the journey through the next 40, 50, 60 years of your life. Has to be a partner that's fully on board with where you want to go. And I'm so happy that you found someone like that. I mean, we're happy for you.
I sometimes think about it this way. Wouldn't it be very stressful if, you know, kind of you're a saver and say your spouse is a spender, right? There would always be tension and there will always be conflict, right? And this tension and conflict, you know, is a day-to-day thing. So I wouldn't really, I cannot visualize how it would work. It's just very stressful for me, you know. So again, I think very important. You brought up that, you know, marry somebody who has values, including financial, kind of aligned to yours. I think not only does that help to build wealth, which is good, right? But more importantly, there's just less stress in the household.
You don't need all that
angst,
drama, right?
Life is already very messy and very challenging. You don't need extra angst, you know, between the husband and wife.
So I mean,
Totally
agree, right? So I think having a happy home is so important. Regardless of where you live, is the home that the people in your life. It's so important. All right, so I think we've had a wonderful time having you. I think you've shared so many wonderful insights into your journey. I hope any of you, those of you who are watching this, you're still on your journey for yourself. How do you achieve FIRE? With 2 young kids, still, I mean, they're still young. 5 and 2 is a long way to go.
Still a long way to go.
But you plan all this out, and you have a wife that's fully on board with your decisions and everything. I think you've done a fantastic job. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thanks so much, I would say it's a work in progress.
Always.
Right? So certainly, we hope that moving forward, it'll still be okay, and certainly we'll continue to try our best.
Yes. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for sharing
you
your
for
story.
coming.
So I really hope you're watching this, you learned something from that. You can apply it for yourself. Thank you for sharing your story, so everyone can learn as well. So I think, is there anything you guys want to share about?
That's all.
That's pretty much it.
I think your wife will be happy after watching this.
Awesome, man.
And you'll be
That's
happy.
priceless.
All right, so my name is Adam. This is Matthew,
so much.
our special guest for today, Rusmin and Victor.
Thank you.
Any questions you want to ask Matthew, we can put them in the comment section. If
Please
there's
do.
anything that's really relevant, I'll forward it to Matthew as
You
well.
just email him.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. And of course, if you like this video, please hit the like button. That will really help with the algorithm. And of course, subscribe to our channel. Many more roundtables coming up, and we'll see you again.